What kind of grandfather looks into the eyes of his grandchildren and decides their future titles, their place in history, are worth less than the image of a crown? That is not a question most of us ever thought we would have to ask. Yet today, in the corridors of Buckingham Palace, King Charles made a move so drastic, so irreversible, that even seasoned royal historians are still reeling. The announcement has torn open old wounds, reignited bitter debates, and left Prince Harry and Meghan Markle in tears across the ocean. And the world is watching, shocked, confused, divided. Was this the only way to protect the monarchy? Or is this the ultimate betrayal of blood? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Let's not pretend this was just another ceremonial gesture. No, this decree wasn't about adjusting protocols or fine-tuning titles. This was a definitive severing of ties, a message carved into the royal record with no room for revision. Archie and Lilibet, once styled prince and princess, will never again carry those titles. Not when they grow older. Not if public opinion changes. Not even if the monarchy itself collapses under scandal. Their removal is permanent, final, non-negotiable. And the man behind it, King Charles, has shown the world a steel most people thought he lacked. But why now? Why this dramatic step at this precise moment in history? And what does it mean for the already fractured royal family? Picture this: Harry and Meghan, sitting in their Montecito home, scrolling through the news alerts as the royal decree flashes across every screen. Headlines screaming of history. Commentators scrambling for context. Social media exploding in fury, support, disbelief. Imagine the silence in that room as their children's names are stripped of a status once promised at birth. Can you feel the weight of that silence? The unspoken rage? The heartbreak? And then, the realization that nothing they say, nothing they do, can ever undo what Charles has signed into law. The monarchy thrives on symbolism. Every gesture, every word, every decree carries meaning beyond the page. And this one? It's a declaration that loyalty to the crown comes before loyalty to blood. Do you remember when Meghan sat with Oprah and insisted that the conversations about titles weren't about prestige, but about security, protection, dignity? Many dismissed it. Many mocked it. But today, those words echo back with haunting clarity. She warned the world. And now, those fears have manifested in a way that even her most ardent critics cannot deny. But this isn't just about Meghan's warnings. This decision strikes at the heart of Harry's identity. For decades, he has lived in the shadow of duty, torn between love for his family and rebellion against its suffocating rules. In leaving the UK, he thought he could step outside the game. Yet here it is. The game following him across the Atlantic, stripping his children of the very titles that mark their royal blood. And the bitter irony? He once said he wanted his children to grow up free from the burdens of the institution. But freedom, it seems, has come with a price he never anticipated. Ask yourself this: what does it mean when a monarch chooses the survival of an institution over the unity of his family? Is this strength, or is it cruelty? Does this decision protect the monarchy from ridicule, or does it expose its fragility? Think of the contradictions. A king who talks of modernizing the monarchy, making it more relatable, yet enacts one of the harshest, most rigid decrees in modern royal history. A grandfather who smiles at garden parties, but signs a document that forever distances him from the laughter of his grandchildren. How does that reconcile? And yet, the timing is no coincidence. The monarchy has been under relentless strain. Harry's memoir, Meghan's interviews, Netflix documentaries, all have chipped away at the family's carefully polished facade. Public trust in the monarchy wavers with every new scandal. King Charles, conscious of his relatively short reign ahead, seeks to consolidate power, to define his legacy early. Stripping Archie and Lilibet of their titles sends a message. This monarchy will not be undermined. This monarchy will not be mocked. This monarchy will survive at all costs. But what of the cost to Harry and Meghan? Can you imagine the conversations behind closed doors? Meghan asking Harry, how could he do this? To them? To us? Harry, perhaps pacing, perhaps silent, replaying every confrontation he's ever had with his father. The unresolved pain of Diana's death. The constant comparisons to William. The feeling of being the spare, magnified now onto his children. The generational wound deepening. Isn't it cruelly poetic? Diana fought to humanize her boys, to shield them from the cold machinery of monarchy. And yet, decades later, her son's children are the ones cast out, rejected by that very machinery. The world is not blind to the symbolism. In America, commentators are already framing this as punishment for Harry's defiance, retaliation for Meghan's refusal to stay silent. In Britain, traditionalists hail it as necessary, overdue, even righteous. And in between, millions of ordinary people ask the same burning question: is it worth it? Worth destroying relationships? Worth igniting global controversy? Worth turning children into pawns? All for the dignity of the crown? Or has Charles just crossed a line from which there is no return? But here is the most chilling part. This decree is irreversible, not temporary, not subject to the whim of future monarchs, locked into royal precedent with legal binding. That permanence is a knife twist that cannot be ignored. Why was that clause necessary? What does it reveal about Charles's mindset? About his fear that the monarchy, under future reigns, could once again be exposed to Harry's influence? It's as though he is sealing off every exit, ensuring that no one, not William, not George, not anyone, can ever restore Archie and Lilibet's place. A generational punishment, a lifetime scar. And so we stand at a crossroads in royal history. A monarchy tightening its grip, even as its popularity wanes. A family breaking apart, even as they try to project unity. A king who may have secured the dignity of the crown, but at what human cost? And Harry and Meghan, standing in California, holding their children, wondering how to explain one day why their grandfather chose the monarchy over them. But make no mistake, the story doesn't end here. Because behind this historic decree, there are whispers of deeper motives, hidden influences, and power struggles that go far beyond Charles alone. And when we uncover who really pushed for this decision, the scandal may turn darker than anyone imagined. What if the grand, polished announcement wasn't the whole truth? What if behind the official statement, carefully worded, broadcast with regal authority, there lurked raw emotions, private arguments, and whispered deals? The world saw one thing, a king declaring a decree. But what Harry and Meghan lived in that very same moment was something far darker. The bombshell had landed, not with ceremony, but with devastation. Imagine it. The email pings, the phone buzzes, the headlines begin to spread like wildfire. Harry glances at his phone. His face hardens. Meghan sees it, and instantly she knows it's not good news. Her heart races. Her mind flashes back to every doubt, every warning, every conversation where she told Harry that one day, the institution would cut them off for good. And here it is. Confirmation. Final. Public. Inescapable. The official tone of the decree, dry, distant, cold, stands in sharp contrast to the emotions spilling over in California. Do you notice that irony? The palace released the words almost clinically. Their Royal Highnesses Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet will no longer be styled as such. Their removal from the line of succession is hereby finalized. A historic sentence delivered with the precision of a scalpel. And yet, halfway across the world, the people most affected were collapsing under the weight of those words. Think about that divide. A family matter presented to the world as mere protocol. A grandfather's choice disguised as duty. A monarchy hiding behind tradition while, in reality, a very real heartbreak unfolds. Doesn't that contradiction cut deep? Doesn't it make you question what kind of system places pomp over people, duty over children, legacy over love? And then the reactions start pouring in. CNN cuts to a panel. Sky News rolls out an urgent breaking news banner. Social media floods with opinions. One tweet says, "About time, titles should be reserved for working royals." Another cries out, "This is cruelty." These are children. Thousands of voices, millions of opinions, but only two voices are silent, Harry and Meghan's. Their silence screams louder than any comment could. But silence does not mean calm. No, behind closed doors, there is fury. Imagine Harry pacing back and forth in their sunlit living room, torn between rage and despair. His voice cracks as he asks, "Why now? Why like this?" Meghan, sitting on the couch, her eyes red, shaking her head in disbelief. She knew it was coming, but knowing it doesn't dull the pain. It magnifies it. Because when you prepare for betrayal, and it still arrives, It means the betrayal is even deeper than you feared. Do you think Harry blames himself? That's the question haunting him. He chose to leave. He chose freedom. He chose to speak out against the monarchy. And now, his children have paid the price. Does he regret it? Or does he cling to the idea that freedom is worth any cost, even this? And Meghan, can you picture her trying to comfort Harry, while inside, she is also consumed by guilt? She once said titles didn't matter. She once told the world she only cared about safety, dignity, and love. But now, stripped of titles, her children will always carry the shadow of rejection. A rejection branded into history books. Will Meghan always wonder, did I push too hard? Did I force the monarchy's hand? The media firestorm doesn't help. Cameras outside Montecito. Helicopters buzzing overhead. Reporters calling sources for any scrap of detail. Paparazzi flashing lights at the gate. While Charles sits in London behind high palace walls, Harry and Meghan cannot hide. Their grief becomes spectacle. Their tears become content. Their pain becomes debate fodder. Isn't it cruel how a private tragedy becomes public theater? And then comes the sharpest twist. The very words Charles used in his decree. Words meant to sound noble, dignified, regal. To protect the dignity of the crown. Think about that. Protecting dignity by humiliating his own grandchildren? Protecting dignity by sparking a storm of outrage around the world? Do those words make sense? Or do they expose the monarchy's greatest irony, that it will sacrifice humanity for the sake of image? But wait, there's more to this scene than tears. Because as Harry and Meghan crumble in private, the wider royal family reacts in silence. No word from William. No word from Kate. No word from Camilla. Silence. Strategic, calculated silence. And in that silence, one can hear approval. Because make no mistake, this wasn't Charles alone. Behind him stand advisors, courtiers, family members who either pushed him forward or quietly nodded when the pen scratched across that decree. So what happens now? Do Harry and Meghan issue a statement? Do they call out Charles publicly? Or do they stay quiet, choosing dignity over rage? The world waits, every camera pointed at their door, every journalist ready to dissect their next word. But behind that door, Harry and Meghan are asking themselves an even darker question. Is this the final nail in the coffin of reconciliation? Is this decree the point of no return? And as they ask that, as their children sleep unaware of the storm outside, one reality grows clearer. This isn't just a family rift. This is a war of narratives. A war between institution and individuals. Between a king desperate to protect his reign and a son desperate to protect his family. And wars like this, they don't end quietly. Because the more you examine the words, the more you see the fingerprints of hidden motives. This wasn't just about Archie and Lilibet. This was about power. About punishing Harry. About silencing Meghan. About ensuring that future generations remember who holds the keys to the royal legacy. And as Harry and Meghan slowly realize this, their silence will not last forever. Something will break. Something will explode. And when it does, the monarchy may regret the very decree it thought would protect it. But before we get there, we must ask, why did Charles do it? What drove him to make a choice so ruthless, so irreversible, so historic? Was it truly about dignity? Or was there another, far more personal reason? And that answer takes us deeper into the king's mind than ever before. Why would a king risk the love of his son, the respect of his grandchildren, and the sympathy of the public to sign away something as symbolic as royal titles? Why now, when the monarchy is already under unprecedented global scrutiny? Was this a bold act of leadership or an act of desperation? Let's peel back the polished layers of Buckingham Palace and step into the shadows where decisions like this are really made. Because while the official line speaks of protecting the dignity of the crown, the truth behind King Charles's bombshell move is far more complicated and perhaps far more troubling. First, consider the timing. Just months into his reign, Charles faces what his advisors call a credibility crisis. Harry's memoir, Meghan's explosive interviews, and their high-profile deals in America have painted the monarchy not as an institution of dignity, but as a family plagued by cruelty, favoritism, and scandal. Public approval wavers. Polls show growing indifference to the monarchy, especially among young people. The future feels uncertain. So Charles acts. A drastic move to assert authority, to remind the world that he is not weak, not indecisive, not merely the shadow of his late mother. Do you see the irony? To prove his strength, he strikes against the weakest, his own grandchildren. And yet, Charles has always been a man of contradictions. He is the king who speaks of compassion, of healing divisions, of bringing people together under the banner of tradition. But he is also the king who has lived his life yearning for approval, haunted by Diana's memory, scarred by public humiliation. Perhaps, in this moment, stripping Archie and Lilibet's titles was not just about protecting the monarchy. Perhaps it was about silencing the ghosts that have followed him for decades. Think of it. For years, Charles was accused of weakness. Too soft, too indecisive, too easily swayed. His critics doubted he could ever reign with authority. And what better way to silence those critics than to make the boldest, most ruthless decision of his reign so far? A decision no one can undo. A decision that says, I am king, and my word is final. Isn't that the kind of statement Charles has craved the chance to make all his life? But there's another layer here, one far more political. Within the walls of the palace, courtiers and senior royals whispered for months that Harry and Meghan's independence posed a long-term threat. Their American fame, their media power, their ability to shape the narrative, this was dangerous. If Archie and Lilibet kept their titles, the Sussexes could wield them as tools, symbols of legitimacy, even marketing leverage. A Hollywood prince, an American princess, a rival royal court, outside the monarchy's control. Doesn't it suddenly make sense? By stripping those titles, Charles cuts off that power before it can ever take root. And then there's the family dynamic. William, the heir, the man destined to inherit the throne. For Charles, securing William's future is not just a duty, it's an obsession. William cannot ascend burdened by distractions, scandals, or a brother's competing royal legacy. By removing Archie and Lilibet from the line of succession, Charles clears the path. No ambiguity, no split loyalties. The future belongs to William, George, Charlotte, and Louis. Harry's branch of the family is erased from the royal script. Clean. Final. But does this reveal strength or fear? That is the question. Is Charles acting as a visionary monarch, ensuring clarity for the future? Or is he a fearful father, lashing out at the son who defied him, punishing grandchildren who did nothing to deserve it? Look closer, and you'll see both. Because make no mistake, Charles is not acting alone. Advisors, senior royals, political figures all played a role. The monarchy is a machine, and Charles is both its operator and its prisoner. Did he sign the decree willingly, or was he cornered into it? Imagine the conversations. Advisors warning him of Harry's next memoir, William pressing him to act for the sake of the throne, Camilla quietly urging him to prove his decisiveness. Can you hear it? Can you see him, pen in hand, knowing that once the ink dried, nothing could ever be undone? And let's not ignore the personal sting. Charles has never forgiven Harry for the way he and Meghan spoke of the monarchy. The racism allegations, the coldness accusations, the Netflix docuseries painting the palace as villains. For Charles, every one of those moments was a wound. And now, this decree is the counterstrike, the retaliation, the king's revenge. So ask yourself, is this really about dignity, or is it about payback? Is this the decision of a king, or the vendetta of a father who feels betrayed? But here lies the cruel twist. In protecting the monarchy, Charles may have doomed it. Because every act of coldness, every public humiliation of Harry and Meghan, feeds the narrative of cruelty, division, heartlessness. Diana's shadow grows stronger, not weaker. Sympathy drifts toward the Sussexes, not the crown. And in trying to silence them, Charles may have handed them the most powerful weapon of all, a story of injustice too shocking for the world to ignore. And what happens when William, the man silently standing behind this move, eventually faces the backlash? What happens when Harry decides to fight back? Not just with interviews, but with something far more explosive. Because as ruthless as Charles's decree was, it may have lit a fire in Harry that no royal decree can extinguish. And that fire is about to burn brighter than ever. What does it feel like to watch your children's birthright vanish in a single headline? To sit thousands of miles away while your father, the king, decides your son and daughter are no longer worthy of titles they were once promised? That's the question Harry and Meghan had to face, suddenly, brutally. without warning. Inside their California mansion, the mood shifted in an instant. One moment, it was a normal day in Montecito. The next, phones were buzzing, screens lighting up with breaking news alerts. Harry glanced down, saw the words "Royal Decree," and his stomach dropped. Meghan, catching the look on his face, whispered, "What is it?" His silence said it all. Then he read the words aloud. Archie and Lilibet, stripped of their titles. The shock was physical. Meghan gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Harry sank into a chair, staring blankly as though the words couldn't possibly be real. This wasn't a rumor. This wasn't tabloid speculation. This was official, stamped by Buckingham Palace and echoed by every news outlet in the world. Their children, once recognized as prince and princess, had been cut off forever. Imagine the emotions coursing through that room. Rage, grief, betrayal, confusion, and above all, helplessness. Because no matter what they felt, no matter how loudly they screamed behind closed doors, the decision had already been made. Charles had signed it. The world had seen it. Nothing they could do would undo it. Harry's mind must have raced. Did he replay conversations with his father? Did he recall moments when Charles promised the monarchy was modernizing, when he suggested reconciliation was possible? Did he hear his father's voice saying, "I love you, boy," and then feel the sting of the contradiction? Because what kind of love leads to this? And Meghan, the woman who had warned him, she said from the start that the institution would never protect them. She said the titles were about security, about legitimacy, about shielding their children from being treated as outsiders. For years, she was dismissed, mocked, accused of exaggerating. But now, her greatest fear had materialized. How could she not feel vindication and devastation all at once? Picture her sitting there, tears in her eyes, whispering, "I told you, Harry. I told you this would happen." Not with arrogance, not with satisfaction, but with heartbreak. Because being right in this moment didn't bring relief, it brought unbearable pain. And then came the children. Archie, old enough to notice the tension in the room. "Why are you sad, Mama?" he might have asked. How do you answer a question like that? How do you tell a child that his grandfather, the King of England, has erased his title, his future, his place in the royal line, all to protect the dignity of the crown? Do you soften it? Do you hide it? Or do you tell the truth? Now think of the contradictions. Harry once said he wanted his children to grow up free, unburdened by the monarchy's chains. And yet, now that freedom has been forced upon them, not as a gift, but as a rejection, isn't it cruelly ironic? The very independence he longed for is now wrapped in humiliation, a freedom born of exclusion. And Meghan, who tried to carve out a safe life in America, is now facing the one thing she feared most, her children being defined by what they are denied. Can you imagine the fury burning inside her? The instinct to protect clashing with the reality that she cannot shield Archie and Lilibet from this very public wound? Outside their walls, the world was dissecting every detail. Journalists camped outside the gates, neighbors whispering about the headlines. Social media lit up with debates, some defending the king, others calling him heartless. And Harry and Meghan sat in the middle of it, silent, watching strangers argue about their children's worth. But silence does not equal acceptance. Already, sources close to the couple whispered that Meghan was inconsolable, that Harry was furious. Could this be the breaking point? Could this be the moment that pushes Harry from anger into action? Think about it. Every time the monarchy has tried to silence him, Harry has responded louder. He left the UK. He gave interviews. He wrote a memoir. He produced documentaries. Each step was bolder, riskier, more revealing. So ask yourself, what happens when a father sees his children humiliated by the very institution he once swore to serve? Does he stay quiet? Or does he strike back harder than ever before? Because make no mistake, this was more than a symbolic loss. It was personal. Harry and Meghan's tears weren't just for Archie and Lilibet's titles. They were for the final nail in the coffin of reconciliation. For the realization that Charles had chosen crown over family. For the echo of Diana's legacy, her fight to shield her sons, now betrayed by the very man she once called husband. And yet, amidst the grief, one thought surely burned brighter than all others. If Charles could do this, what else was he willing to do? What other lines was he willing to cross to protect the monarchy? And that chilling question is what set the stage for the storm to come. because Harry and Meghan's reaction, as devastating as it was, would only be the beginning. The deeper story lay not in their tears, but in the motive behind Charles's choice. And when that motive is exposed, the entire world will see this decree in a very different light. Why would Charles, a man who spent his entire life waiting for the throne, gamble his fragile popularity on a move so merciless? Why would he risk alienating his youngest son forever and invite global outrage by stripping Archie and Lilibet of their birthright? Was this truly about protecting the dignity of the crown, or was that phrase just a mask for something far more personal, maybe even vindictive? Let's step back and look at the man behind the crown. King Charles has always been a figure of contradictions. To some, he is gentle, soft-spoken, almost overly sensitive. To others, he is calculating, stubborn, and obsessed with image. He inherited from his mother a monarchy revered around the world, but also one bruised by scandal, weakened by years of internal division. And Charles knows, perhaps better than anyone, that he will not reign for decades. His time is limited. His legacy must be cemented quickly, decisively. So when Harry and Meghan broke away, when they painted the monarchy as cold, racist, and unfeeling, Charles didn't just see family betrayal. He saw a threat to the very institution he had waited 70 years to lead. Imagine standing in his shoes. Everything you've ever worked for, everything your life was supposed to mean, being undermined by your own child. How would you react? Would you show patience, or would you strike back? But the answer isn't as simple as revenge. No, this decision to strip Archie and Lilibet was layered. Political, symbolic, strategic, and perhaps above all, personal. Think about the phrase used in the decree: to protect the dignity of the crown. It sounds noble, regal. But what does it really mean? Dignity, in this context, means control. It means ensuring that no rogue branch of the family can exploit titles for fame, money, or influence. And isn't that exactly what Harry and Meghan have been accused of? Turning royal connections into a global brand? For Charles, this wasn't just about his grandchildren. It was about stopping this Sussex brand from leveraging royal legitimacy for decades to come. And then there's William, the heir, the future. Charles is painfully aware that his reign is transitional, that the real weight of the monarchy's survival will rest on William's shoulders. Stripping Archie and Lilibet clears the path for William's children. No confusion, no split loyalties, no rival princes and princesses living in California. Just one clean, uncontested line of succession. Doesn't it suddenly look less like punishment and more like strategy? But if this was strategy, it was also deeply personal. Because no one can deny the shadow of Diana in this story. Diana, the people's princess, who exposed Charles's flaws to the world. Diana, who fought to humanize her boys, who vowed they would never be crushed by the cold machinery of monarchy. And yet, decades later, here is Charles, stripping his own son's children of dignity. Isn't that the ultimate contradiction? Doesn't it echo every criticism Diana ever voiced about the institution? Some say Charles acted under pressure. Advisors, the so-called men in gray suits, whispered that action was needed. Courtiers have always feared Harry and Meghan's growing influence in America. Imagine a world where Archie and Lilibet, carrying royal titles, grow up as celebrities, mixing politics, Hollywood, and monarchy. For the palace, that was a nightmare. They could not allow a parallel royal court to thrive across the Atlantic. By striking now, Charles ensured the monarchy remained firmly in London, under his and William's control. But was this really Charles's choice? Or was he cornered? That's the chilling question. Did he pick up the pen willingly, determined to act? Or did Camilla, William, and advisors push him into it, warning that his legacy was on the line? Can you picture the private conversations? A weary king, already battling health rumors, being told, "If you don't do this now, your reign will look weak." The weight of centuries pressing on his shoulders. The fear of being remembered as the monarch who let the institution crumble. How much of this was conviction, and how much was fear? Because here's the truth. Charles has always feared being overshadowed. Overshadowed by his mother, the Queen. Overshadowed by Diana. And now, overshadowed by Harry and Meghan's international fame. Maybe this decree wasn't just about protecting the crown. Maybe it was about Charles finally proving he could be strong, ruthless, unyielding. For once in his life, Not the man left behind, but the man making history. But here's the bitter irony. In trying to look strong, he may have exposed the monarchy's greatest weakness. By punishing children, by making such a merciless decree, Charles has painted himself as cold, even cruel. And that image, once attached to him, will be nearly impossible to shake. Does that sound like strength? Or does it sound like desperation? And we cannot ignore the question of timing. Why now? Why so suddenly? Some whisper it's because Charles's health is worse than the palace admits, that he wants his legacy secured before it's too late. Others believe William pushed harder than ever, demanding clarity for his children's future. And still others claim it was Meghan's latest moves, business deals, political networking, that forced the palace's hand. Whatever the trigger, the outcome is the same. Archie and Lilibet are out. Permanently. So here we are. A king who has chosen the monarchy over his son. A father who has drawn a line in the sand, making reconciliation nearly impossible. And a family fractured beyond repair. But what happens when William, the silent heir, is revealed to have quietly approved this move? Because that silence, that silence, speaks volumes. And when the world learns just how much William supported this, the royal feud may enter a phase darker than anyone imagined. What is more dangerous, words spoken aloud, or silence that lingers in the air? Because in this royal saga, it wasn't Charles's decree alone that shook the world, it was William's silence. No statement, no denial, no show of sympathy for his brother's children. Nothing. And yet, that nothing speaks volumes. Let's be brutally honest. Do you believe, even for a second, that Charles made this move without consulting William? Of course not. The heir to the throne would have been looped in from the beginning. He is not just Charles's son, he is the future. Every decision Charles makes now is as much about protecting William's reign as it is about protecting his own. So if Charles signed the decree, William either approved it, or, at the very least, didn't stop it. And that, perhaps, is the deepest cut of all for Harry. Picture it, the two brothers, once inseparable, bound by tragedy after their mother's death, now on opposite sides of an invisible battlefield. Harry, devastated as his children are stripped of their titles. William, standing silently in London, watching events unfold, his lips sealed but his stance clear. Isn't it chilling to think that silence can feel like betrayal? But William's silence isn't just passive. It's strategic. The monarchy survives on appearances. William knows that if he publicly defended Harry, he would undermine Charles. If he publicly condemned Charles, he would fracture the monarchy. So he does what royals have always done. He says nothing. But what does that silence cost? Because for Harry, that silence is louder than any insult. It says, I agree. I stand with father. And I stand against you. Let's not forget the long, bitter history between these brothers. Do you remember the funeral walk? The strained body language, the forced conversations? That was the world's first glimpse of a rift that had already turned into a chasm. William believed Harry abandoned duty. Harry believed William abandoned him. Now, with this decree, that chasm may never be bridged. And here's where it gets darker. Because William doesn't just benefit from this decision, he depends on it. Every step of his future rests on clarity. His children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, are now firmly secured as the only royal grandchildren with titles and positions in the direct line. There is no ambiguity. No Californian branch of the family carrying rival titles. No chance of Archie and Lilibet overshadowing George in the future. William's line is protected, and Harry's line is erased. Doesn't it sound less like coincidence and more like design? But here's the contradiction. William has always been portrayed as the stable one, the dutiful one, the brother who puts family above all. Yet here, he has allowed his own niece and nephew to be stripped of their birthright. Does that look like stability, or does it look like ambition dressed in silence? And let's not forget Kate. Though she remains in the background, her influence on William is undeniable. She knows her children's future depends on eliminating distractions. Do you think she sat by passively? Or do you think she quietly supported the move, nodding when Charles laid out his plans? If so, Harry's pain runs even deeper. Not just his father, not just his brother, but his sister-in-law, the woman he once described as the sister he never had. Now, let's consider the public perception. William's silence allows him to remain untarnished. To the world, It looks like Charles's decision alone. William appears clean, above the fray, the dutiful son preparing to inherit. But behind the curtain, that silence is complicity. And if the truth ever comes out, that William quietly supported the move, it will shatter whatever fragile hope of reconciliation remained between the brothers. Ask yourself this. Is William protecting the monarchy, or is he protecting himself? Is he ensuring stability for Britain, or is he simply removing a rival branch of the family tree? Because history tells us something chilling. Royal siblings have always been rivals. From Edward VIII and George VI to Henry VIII and his siblings to even earlier dynasties, the story is always the same. Brothers divided by the crown, one destined to rule, the other destined to suffer. And in Harry and William, we are seeing history repeat itself. The heir and the spare, bound by blood, divided by destiny. And now, that divide is permanent. Harry's children cast out, William's children secured. The roles have never been clearer. But here's the twist. By staying silent, William may have secured his children's future, but at what cost to his soul? Can a man preach loyalty, compassion, and family values while standing by as his own niece and nephew are humiliated? That silence will haunt him, even if the public doesn't see it yet. And one day, when George, Charlotte, and Louis are old enough to understand what happened, what will they think of their father's silence? Because silence isn't neutral. Silence is a choice. And William's choice has driven the final wedge between him and Harry. A wedge that may never be removed. But William isn't the only player here. As the media frenzy grows, as headlines scream of betrayal and cruelty, the monarchy itself becomes the story. And the firestorm that follows will show just how explosive Charles's decision really was. Because if William's silence was deafening, the media's roar was unstoppable. It started with a single push notification. Breaking: King Charles strips Archie and Lilibet of royal titles. Within seconds, the story spread across the globe like wildfire. Television networks interrupted regular programming. Newspapers rushed out digital editions. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, every corner of the internet exploded. But what made this moment so powerful wasn't just the announcement itself. It was how the media turned it into a spectacle, shaping the narrative in real time, feeding it into living rooms, smartphones, and headlines from London to Los Angeles. The framing was everything. British tabloids took one approach, triumphant, almost celebratory. The Daily Mail ran with a banner reading, "Charles acts to protect crown." The Sun plastered, "Harry's children out," in bold red letters. The tone was clear. This was strength, decisiveness, the monarchy tightening control. But across the Atlantic, the coverage looked very different. American outlets leaned into heartbreak. CNN described it as a devastating blow for Harry and Meghan. The New York Times posed a question in its headline: tradition or betrayal? Suddenly, the world wasn't just reporting, it was judging. And then came the television panels. Experts in suits, royal commentators, historians, psychologists, body language specialists, all lined up to dissect every angle. One argued it was about streamlining the monarchy. Another called it a cold act of revenge. A third suggested Charles was simply protecting William's children from future competition. Can you see how each explanation twisted the story a little further, leaving viewers torn between admiration and outrage? But it wasn't just the polished commentators. Social media lit up in a frenzy of hashtags and memes. Hashtag Justice for Archie trended on Twitter. TikTokers stitched together dramatic montages of Diana holding baby Harry, overlaying text that read, "What would she say now?" Instagram posts compared photos of Charles smiling at Camilla's grandchildren with his cold silence toward Archie and Lilibet. The contradictions were too glaring to ignore. Didn't this look like favoritism? Didn't it expose a monarchy that still, in 2025, couldn't escape accusations of exclusion? And then came the think pieces. Long essays in The Guardian, The Atlantic, Vanity Fair. Some painted Charles as a reformer, carving out a slimmed-down monarchy fit for the modern age. Others accused him of cruelty, hypocrisy, and weakness disguised as strength. Each article pulled the audience deeper into the debate. Was this about institution or vendetta? Meanwhile, royal allies fed carefully chosen quotes to journalists. The king had no choice, one senior source whispered to the press. The dignity of the crown must be preserved. Another source hinted it was about protecting William's legacy. Notice how these leaks always protect Charles and William, framing the decision as noble, necessary, inevitable. But who wasn't leaking? Harry, Meghan. Their silence became its own headline. Sussexes refused to comment. Meghan in tears behind closed doors. The absence of their voices allowed the press to fill the gap with speculation, some sympathetic, some venomous. And here's where the contradiction sharpens. Charles wanted dignity. Yet the very act of stripping titles created chaos. Instead of protecting the monarchy, the decree thrust it into the center of global controversy. For days, every major outlet ran round-the-clock coverage, dragging up old wounds. Diana, racism allegations, the Oprah interview, Meghan's tears. The monarchy wasn't elevated. It was exposed. Doesn't it feel like Charles's attempt to strengthen the crown only weakened it? Let's pause for a moment and imagine how Harry and Meghan watched this unfold. Every headline a dagger. Every commentator's analysis another wound. Meghan scrolling through posts, seeing strangers mock her children. Harry hearing talking heads speculate about whether he'd lash out again. Their personal heartbreak turned into global entertainment. Have you ever been in a moment of grief and watched others turn it into gossip? That's what they were living, but on a stage seen by billions. But amidst the chaos, one detail slipped almost unnoticed, buried in the coverage. A single phrase in the official decree, irrevocable and binding upon future reigns. Legal analysts highlighted it quietly, but the implication was earth-shattering. This wasn't just Charles asserting power now. This was Charles tying the hands of every future monarch, including William. No one could ever reinstate Archie and Lilibet, not even if public opinion demanded it, not even if William wanted to. This clause turned a royal decree into a generational scar. And when the media finally noticed it, the narrative shifted again. The headlines grew darker. Irreversible. Charles erases Sussex children from monarchy forever. Suddenly, it wasn't just a family dispute. It was history being rewritten. The permanence of it all sent shockwaves far deeper than the initial announcement. So, what began as a bombshell became a firestorm, and what became a firestorm morphed into something even more dangerous. A permanent fracture, not just in one family, but in the monarchy itself. Because now the world wasn't asking if this was right or wrong. They were asking what comes next. And the question that echoed louder than all others was simple. If Charles was willing to go this far, what else is he prepared to do? What does irreversible really mean when stamped on a royal decree? Is it just another ceremonial flourish? Or is it the most brutal lock ever placed on a royal family tree? Because when Charles's announcement first hit the press, most people were too stunned by the headlines to notice that one word buried inside the official language. Irrevocable. Permanent. Binding. And that single word changed everything. Royal decrees are not light gestures. They are legal instruments, sealed with the authority of the monarch, preserved in the archives of state, and honored by future kings and queens. Most decrees can, in theory, be reversed by a successor. But this one carried a clause so rare, so definitive, that even veteran constitutional scholars had to take a pause. The language was absolute. Archie and Lilibet would not only lose their titles now, they would be barred from ever regaining them under any reign, under any circumstance. Their line was erased, wiped clean from the possibility of restoration. Think about the weight of that. Even if William wanted to reconcile with Harry one day, even if George or Charlotte, as future monarchs, grew up sympathetic to their cousins, the decree would tie their hands. No forgiveness, no redemption, no second chance. Doesn't that sound less like protection of dignity and more like punishment carved into stone? The monarchy thrives on precedent. Every action taken today becomes the blueprint for tomorrow. By inserting an irreversible clause, Charles has essentially weaponized history itself against his own grandchildren. Legal experts immediately pointed out how unusual this was. The Queen, for instance, never used such language when adjusting royal titles. Even when Edward VIII abdicated, the language of permanence wasn't this sharp. That's why this decision feels so chilling. It wasn't just a legal strike, it was personal. Now imagine Harry's reaction when that detail hit the press. At first, the pain was shock, disbelief, fury. But then came the realization. This wasn't just about Charles cutting off his children now. This was about Charles ensuring that no matter what happened in the future, no matter who sat on the throne, Archie and Lilibet would remain outside the royal fold forever. Can you see how devastating that must have been? Not just rejection, exile, generational exile. And let's not forget the optics. The palace insisted the clause was about stability and clarity, but to millions watching around the world, it read like cruelty. Protecting dignity by punishing children? Creating stability by ensuring an eternal fracture in the family? What kind of dignity is that? Even sympathetic commentators struggled to defend the permanence of it. One historian admitted live on television, "This is extraordinary. We have not seen this kind of finality in centuries." The clause also raises haunting questions about trust within the family. If Charles truly trusted William to manage the monarchy wisely in the future, why would he need to tie his hands? Why would he strip his own heir of the power to reconcile? Does this reveal confidence in William, or fear that William might eventually undo what Charles has done? In trying to lock down control, Charles may have inadvertently exposed his own doubts about the future king. And here's the irony. Permanence is not always permanent. Legal scholars hinted that in theory, Parliament could override the decree. A future monarch could push for reform. But politically, that would be almost impossible. To reverse Charles's decree would mean admitting he was wrong. It would mean reigniting the entire scandal. So while technically there may be loopholes, practically, this was a coffin sealed tight. This clause also has a darker symbolism. It sends a message not just to Harry and Meghan, but to anyone who dares challenge the monarchy. Step out of line, and the punishment will not just affect you. It will scar your children. It will ripple through generations. It's a warning, a chilling precedent. The monarchy remembers, and it does not forgive. Do you feel the contradiction? A family institution, supposed to embody tradition and unity, using permanence as a weapon against its own blood. This isn't just strategy. It's vengeance written in law. And yet, here's where the story twists even further. Because if the clause was meant to silence Harry, to discourage him from speaking out, it may have the opposite effect. Harry has always been defiant, fueled by injustice. And this is the deepest injustice of all. If Charles thought permanence would end the feud, he may have underestimated his son. Instead of silencing Harry, the clause might ignite a new war, one louder, bolder, and more dangerous than anything that came before. So we're left with a haunting question. If the monarchy can lock children out permanently, if it can turn bloodlines into bargaining chips, what does that say about its soul? And if Charles believes he's secured the monarchy's dignity, has he actually condemned it to look heartless in the eyes of history? Because this clause, this irreversible lock, wasn't the end of the story. It was the trigger, the spark that ensured Meghan's deepest fears, long dismissed, would now come true in full force. And when Meghan realized that truth, that this was never just about titles, but about silencing her and her children, her reaction would turn private heartbreak into public defiance. She warned us. Do you remember? Back in that infamous Oprah interview, Meghan said it wasn't about prestige or status, it was about security. She said titles came with protection, with acknowledgement, with dignity. She told the world there had been conversations about her unborn son not being given a title and the implications of that decision. At the time, critics laughed. Commentators dismissed her concerns. Some even accused her of exaggerating. And yet, here we are. Her words, once ridiculed, have become prophecy. For Meghan, the decree wasn't just another headline. It was her greatest fear realized. From the very beginning, she understood that Archie and Lilibet's titles were more than words before their names. They were shields, symbols of legitimacy in a world where legitimacy is currency. By stripping those titles, the monarchy didn't just reject her children. It marked them as outsiders. And that, for Meghan, was the ultimate betrayal. Can you imagine the rage building inside her? To be told for years that she was paranoid, that she was wrong, that she was playing the victim, only to watch the institution prove her right in the most brutal way? Vindication never felt so hollow. Because what good is being right when your children are the ones paying the price? Picture Meghan pacing their Montecito home, her voice trembling but fierce. This is what I warned them about, Harry. This is exactly what I said they would do. She's furious, not just at Charles, not just at the monarchy, but at the world that refused to believe her. Now, Every insult hurled at her, every headline mocking her fears, feels like a scar reopening. And the cruel irony? The same media that once vilified her now uses her words as sound bites, replaying her warnings as if she were some modern-day Cassandra. And Harry, what does he do in that moment? Does he feel guilt, knowing she begged him to see this coming? Does he feel anger at himself for not protecting his children from this humiliation? Their arguments, their whispered fears, their desperate late-night conversations, all of it has come to pass. And now, as Meghan's fears crystallize, Harry is forced to face the truth. She was right all along. But Meghan's fear went deeper than titles. It was about the narrative. She knew the monarchy controlled stories, controlled perception, controlled history. And by removing those titles, they didn't just wound her children, they branded them. Forever. Archie and Lilibet will grow up not as royals who turned away, but as royals who were denied. Their story will always carry that rejection, no matter how successful or happy they become. Isn't that the cruelest part? The monarchy didn't just decide their present, it scripted their future. And Meghan understands what that means. She knows the world will whisper about her children. She knows classmates, colleagues, journalists will say, they were the ones stripped. That stigma will follow them, long after Charles is gone, long after William takes the throne. And Meghan, as a mother, knows she cannot undo that mark. How do you live with that knowledge? The parallels to Diana are unavoidable. Just as Diana fought desperately to shield Harry and William from the coldness of the institution, Meghan now finds herself in the same role. The outsider. The mother trying to protect her children from a system designed to crush them. The difference? Diana's sons were embraced as heirs, while Meghan's children have been cast out as pawns. Doesn't that echo with a cruel sense of history repeating itself? But here's where Meghan's fear sharpens into fury. Because deep down, she believes this was never about Archie and Lilibet. This was about her. Punishment for speaking out. Retaliation for daring to challenge the monarchy's narrative. By stripping her children, the palace sent a message: Meghan doesn't belong. Her children don't belong. Her legacy will never touch the crown. Isn't that the most personal cut of all? And now Meghan faces a choice. Does she stay silent, shielding her children from more media fire? Or does she speak out again, louder than ever, exposing the monarchy's cruelty for the world to see? If you've followed her journey, you already know the answer. Meghan doesn't back down. She doesn't sit quietly while the institution rewrites her story. And with this decree, she has been handed the most powerful weapon of all: proof. Proof that her fears were never paranoia. Proof that the crown itself acted to exclude her children. Proof that her warnings were not cries for attention, but cries for justice. But Meghan's fury alone isn't the end of this chapter. Because while she burns with vindication and rage, the real question now is, what exactly was the monarchy's true motive? Was it really about dignity, security, and tradition, or was there something else driving this decision? Something darker? Because whispers are growing. Rumors of secret discussions, drafted letters, advisors pushing for blood. And Meghan suspects, no, she knows, this was never about Archie and Lilibet at all. And when the palace's true motive is revealed, the scandal will make today's heartbreak look like just the beginning. What if the monarchy's official explanation, protecting the dignity of the crown, was just a smokescreen? What if Archie and Lilibet weren't the true targets at all, but pawns in a much bigger game? Because as the dust settled on Charles's shocking decree, whispers began to leak from behind palace walls. Whispers suggesting this wasn't about children. It was about power, about silencing Harry, about punishing Meghan, about reminding the world, and the Sussexes, that the crown always has the final word. Think about it. If the monarchy truly cared about streamlining, why not wait? Why not handle it quietly, gradually, as past monarchs have done? Instead, this decree was dramatic, public, irreversible. Doesn't that tell you it was about sending a message? A warning shot, fired across the Atlantic. Harry has spent the last few years dismantling the royal narrative. The memoir, the Netflix series, the interviews. Every revelation peeled away another layer of the monarchy's carefully constructed image. For Charles, this wasn't just inconvenient, it was humiliating. Imagine being crowned king after waiting 70 years, only to have your son paint you as cold, distant, and unfit for compassion. For Charles, every page of Harry's book felt like a betrayal. Every television appearance another knife in the back. Doesn't it make sense, then, that this decree was his way of striking back? But it wasn't just Charles's pride on the line. Palace insiders reveal that advisors had been warning for months about the Sussex problem. Hollywood deals, American fame, political connections, Meghan networking with power players in Washington. The fear was that, with their children still styled as prince and princess, Harry and Meghan could create a rival royal court across the Atlantic. A glamorous, modern version of monarchy, outside palace control. The idea terrified traditionalists. So what better way to cut off that power than to strip the titles now, before Archie and Lilibet could ever wield them? And here's where the theory turns darker. Some believe the decree wasn't just about silencing Harry and Meghan, it was about revenge. Meghan in particular has become the lightning rod. From the Oprah interview's racism allegations to her portrayal of the monarchy as cold and unwelcoming, she struck at the very heart of its global reputation. To the courtiers, Meghan had done the unforgivable. She made the monarchy look cruel. And in their eyes, punishing her children was the ultimate way to hit back. Think about that for a moment. Punishing children, not because of who they are, but because of who their mother is. Doesn't that sound like history's cruelest pattern repeating itself? And then there are the whispers of a draft letter. A document Meghan reportedly once wrote, but never intended for public eyes. In it, she allegedly warned that the institution would do everything in its power to erase her children from the story. At the time, it was dismissed as paranoia. Now, it looks prophetic. Could that letter exist in palace files? Could Meghan, if pushed, reveal it as evidence? Imagine the firestorm if she did. The deeper you dig, the more contradictions appear. The monarchy claims this was about protecting dignity. But how does humiliating children protect dignity? The monarchy claims it was about clarity. But doesn't the permanence of the clause only highlight division? The official story collapses under scrutiny, leaving only one chilling conclusion. This wasn't about titles. It was about control. Ask yourself, who benefits from this? Charles asserts dominance. William's children's path to the throne is cleared. Courtiers re-establish authority. And Meghan? Harry? They are weakened, stripped of leverage. Their children marked forever as outsiders. Doesn't that look less like governance and more like punishment dressed up as tradition? But here's where the plan may backfire. Because the more the monarchy insists this was about dignity, the more the world sees cruelty. The more they claim this was about protecting the institution, the more it looks like retaliation. And if Meghan chooses to fight back, armed with her warnings, her interviews, her influence, the palace may find itself in the very scandal it was trying to avoid. So now the stage is set. A monarchy claiming nobility. A mother feeling vindicated but furious. A father seething in silence. And children caught in the crossfire. But behind it all, the invisible hands of the courtiers, the men in gray suits, continue to pull strings. Because Charles may have signed the decree, but the question everyone is starting to ask is, who really pushed for it? And when that truth comes out, the story of this decree will grow darker still. What if the monarchy's official explanation, protecting the dignity of the crown, was just a smokescreen? What if Archie and Lilibet weren't the true targets at all, but pawns in a much bigger game? Because as the dust settled on Charles's shocking decree, whispers began to leak from behind palace walls. Whispers suggesting this wasn't about children. It was about power, about silencing Harry, about punishing Meghan, about reminding the world, and the Sussexes, that the crown always has the final word. Think about it. If the monarchy truly cared about streamlining, why not wait? Why not handle it quietly, gradually, as past monarchs have done? Instead, this decree was dramatic, public, irreversible. Doesn't that tell you it was about sending a message? A warning shot, fired across the Atlantic. Harry has spent the last few years dismantling the royal narrative. The memoir, the Netflix series, the interviews. Every revelation peeled away another layer of the monarchy's carefully constructed image. For Charles, this wasn't just inconvenient, it was humiliating. Imagine being crowned king after waiting 70 years, only to have your son paint you as cold, distant, and unfit for compassion. For Charles, every page of Harry's book felt like a betrayal. Every television appearance another knife in the back. Doesn't it make sense, then, that this decree was his way of striking back? But it wasn't just Charles's pride on the line. Palace insiders reveal that advisors had been warning for months about the Sussex problem. Hollywood deals, American fame, political connections, Meghan networking with power players in Washington. The fear was that, with their children still styled as prince and princess, Harry and Meghan could create a rival royal court across the Atlantic. A glamorous, modern version of monarchy, outside palace control. The idea terrified traditionalists. So what better way to cut off that power than to strip the titles now, before Archie and Lilibet could ever wield them? And here's where the theory turns darker. Some believe the decree wasn't just about silencing Harry and Meghan, it was about revenge. Meghan in particular has become the lightning rod. From the Oprah interview's racism allegations to her portrayal of the monarchy as cold and unwelcoming, she struck at the very heart of its global reputation. To the courtiers, Meghan had done the unforgivable. She made the monarchy look cruel. And in their eyes, punishing her children was the ultimate way to hit back. Think about that for a moment. Punishing children, not because of who they are, but because of who their mother is. Doesn't that sound like history's cruelest pattern repeating itself? And then there are the whispers of a draft letter. A document Meghan reportedly once wrote, but never intended for public eyes. In it, she allegedly warned that the institution would do everything in its power to erase her children from the story. At the time, it was dismissed as paranoia. Now, it looks prophetic. Could that letter exist in palace files? Could Meghan, if pushed, reveal it as evidence? Imagine the firestorm if she did. The deeper you dig, the more contradictions appear. The monarchy claims this was about protecting dignity. But how does humiliating children protect dignity? The monarchy claims it was about clarity. But doesn't the permanence of the clause only highlight division? The official story collapses under scrutiny, leaving only one chilling conclusion. This wasn't about titles. It was about control. Ask yourself, who benefits from this? Charles asserts dominance. William's children's path to the throne is cleared. Courtiers re-establish authority. And Meghan? Harry? They are weakened, stripped of leverage. Their children marked forever as outsiders. Doesn't that look less like governance and more like punishment dressed up as tradition? But here's where the plan may backfire. Because the more the monarchy insists this was about dignity, the more the world sees cruelty. The more they claim this was about protecting the institution, the more it looks like retaliation. And if Meghan chooses to fight back, armed with her warnings, her interviews, her influence, the palace may find itself in the very scandal it was trying to avoid. So now the stage is set. A monarchy claiming nobility. A mother feeling vindicated but furious. A father seething in silence. And children caught in the crossfire. But behind it all, the invisible hands of the courtiers, the men in gray suits, continue to pull strings. Because Charles may have signed the decree, but the question everyone is starting to ask is, who really pushed for it? And when that truth comes out, the story of this decree will grow darker still. What if the real reason Charles moved so quickly, so ruthlessly, had nothing to do with Harry or Meghan at all, but with time itself? Because whispers have been swirling in London, in political circles, even within the palace staff. King Charles's health is not as stable as the smiling photographs suggest. And when a king knows his time is limited, every decision suddenly takes on a new urgency. Think about it. Why else would Charles move with such finality? Why the irreversible clause? Why the suddenness, the brutality, the refusal to leave even a crack in the door for reconciliation? If his reign stretches long into the future, why rush? But if his reign is shorter than expected, then urgency explains everything. He must secure his legacy now. He must lock in decisions that will define the monarchy after he is gone. And haven't we seen the signs? Those grainy photos of Charles looking frail at certain events. The quiet cancellations of public appearances written off as routine. The vague palace statements about minor health matters. Don't they sound eerily familiar? The same kind of language used with the late Queen when her health quietly declined, even as officials insisted she was in good spirits. The monarchy always cloaks illness in mystery, but leaks slip through. And the leaks suggest that Charles has been struggling more than the palace will ever admit. Now imagine this. Charles, in private meetings with his doctors, learning the prognosis is not optimistic. He looks at his calendar, at the duties still to be performed, at the fragile state of his family. He sees William waiting in the wings, but William isn't ready to be king just yet. And he thinks, I must protect him. I must secure his throne. I cannot leave loose ends. Suddenly, Archie and Lilibet's titles aren't just a matter of dignity. They're a threat to clarity. If Charles passes soon, the monarchy cannot afford uncertainty about who belongs inside the royal circle and who doesn't. And so, with pen in hand, he closes the door permanently. A father making decisions like a king, or perhaps a king making decisions like a man afraid of running out of time. But this is where it turns even darker. Because if Charles acted out of urgency, then this wasn't strength, it was desperation. A desperate man tying the hands of future monarchs, forcing William into a path that may not be his own. And that raises a haunting question. If Charles's health truly is failing, how much of this decree was about his reign, and how much was about controlling William's? History gives us chilling precedents. Kings on their deathbeds making rash decisions to protect succession. Henry VIII rewriting wills to favor certain heirs. Edward VII forcing last-minute changes. Every time, those decisions carried ripple effects for decades. And now, Charles's irreversible decree may be remembered not as an act of dignity, but as the desperate legacy of a sick king. But here's the contradiction. By trying to protect the monarchy from instability, Charles may have introduced instability of another kind. Because once the public senses weakness, once rumors of illness combine with the cruelty of his decree, the narrative shifts. Instead of seeing him as strong, decisive, noble, they see him as frail, panicked, vindictive. And that image could haunt his reign more than any scandal Harry and Meghan ever produced. Ask yourself, if the king's health is fragile, if his time is short, what happens when William takes over with this decree already in place? Does William embrace it as his father's dying wish? Or does he resent being chained to a decision he cannot undo? That resentment could fester. That resentment could fracture. And in trying to secure stability, Charles may have planted the seeds of future division. And Harry? Imagine how he hears these rumors. His father, perhaps dying, has used some of his last acts of authority not to reconcile, not to heal the family, but to erase Harry's children. Can you see the torment in that? The feeling that even on his way out, Charles chose the crown over his son. That isn't just rejection, it's abandonment. But here's the question that cuts deeper than all others. What if Charles's health truly is worse than we know, and this decree is only the first of several drastic moves he will make before his reign ends? What other decisions are coming?